Thanks for joining us for this live webinar on working with MSF in finance and human resource manager roles. My name is Jackie Clark and I'm in the field human resources team at MSF Australia. I would like, and we would like as MSF Australia, to acknowledge the Gadigal of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of this land, and pay my respects to the elders both past and present. This land always was and always will be Aboriginal land. In recognition that we are a binational association, I also take this opportunity to say kia ora to our colleagues joining from New Zealand. This webinar aims to inform finance and human resources professionals about what such roles look like with MSF, as well as the skills and expertise particularly useful in our projects. We currently have quite a strong demand for these profiles in various projects around the world. We're particularly interested in any candidates with strong skills and expertise in both HR and finance, as this is one of the most diverse and challenging roles in an MSF team. On our website, you will find a lot of information on essential criteria. For example, we require a degree in either finance, management, human resources, or business administration, as well as at least 2 years of professional experience in key areas. We will send you the link to our website page with all of this essential criteria so that today we can just focus on hearing from our experienced field worker, Jake. Lucy had planned to join us from Malawi. However, unfortunately, she's had some connectivity problems. There was a cyclone in Malawi over the weekend that hasn't helped, and she has to focus on responding to the flooding there. I have some questions for Jake that we'll start off with in a moment, but please, if you could start posting any general questions via the MSF website, YouTube or Facebook page now, and note that we're unable to answer any questions about your individual suitability. So I'd now like to introduce you to Jake. Jake joins us from Victoria. He's been on 2 assignments over the last couple of years, firstly to Gaza in the Palestinian territory as Project Finance Manager in 2021, and then a further 2 months emergency last year in the Ukraine as Accounting Manager and Finance Manager. Thanks for joining us, Jake. It's great to have you with us.
Thanks, Jackie. Thanks for having me.
In the first instance, would you tell us how you came to join MSF?
Yeah, so I met the criteria. I have a background in finance or an education in finance. So I did a Bachelor of Commerce. And then I went straight into emergency management in Australia in fire and rescue. And I wanted to always be in an international space, international NGO space. Very honestly, I Googled organizations that aligned to my value and purpose, and MSF came up. So I put my application in after having the right experience and went from there.
Fantastic. And maybe could you talk us a little bit about your first assignment in Gaza? What was the role and the project?
So finance manager is what I was recruited for, or what I was put into. I thought I was probably going to something that was a bit more logistics and management space, but as you've already brought up, MSF has a real need for finance and HR experience. That was on my resume, and so lovely people in Sydney put me in that direction, which was fine. And I was really grateful for that to be able to get the experience in finance and HR in a security context where it was challenging. So started in Gaza. You don't really get a choice on where you go, or you don't get to pick and choose. The opportunities come up, and when it was Hazel, rang me up and said, hey, there's an opportunity in Gaza. There's been an escalation. There's a big need for someone with finance skills. Would you be willing? And I had 2 weeks to and to make sure that I had everything in line, and I did my pros and cons list and went from there. The role itself, you're at the ground and you're in Gaza, and you're understanding the forecasting and the budgeting and learning how the business runs. So that was the start and the first day that I was there.
Yeah, so there's that flexibility and adaptability starts right from the beginning, doesn't it? Even before you leave Sydney.
Yeah, yeah, it does.
Yeah.
So, but then I got there and I had a handover from an Australian guy, which was really nice. He was the only other Australian at that time, I think, that was there, and he was a finance manager, and he gave me a booklet and everything and all the procedures. And then 2 days later, the HR manager was leaving, and MSF didn't have anyone to backfill her, and so I was kind of pushed in that direction as well and picked up both of those roles for a little while. And it was okay. I did have a little bit of HR experience. The best thing about it was that you had strong coordination. So people in Jerusalem that have been in MSF for a few years and understand how it all works in the context of Palestine. And then you also have local staff there that were experienced and day in, day out knew what they needed to do. So you had a good team around you.
Yeah, you have some excellent local staff that really make all the difference. I wanted to just ask about the skills and expertise that you particularly need. You know, what were the things that you found most useful in your first assignment in Gaza?
uh, Technical skills, or do you want the problem solving ones and the communication ones? I
Well, I
think,
think actually the problem, I mean, all three, of course, but I think that problem solving and communication skills,
yeah,
and,
I think that's
you
where
know,
it comes to the first thing from an MSF mission, and something that I've learned and has helped me in my career after MSF, has been about the problem solving, the stress management, the interpersonal skills, understanding how people work. The multicultural aspect is something that MSF has allowed me to learn. In my past roles, I was in rural Victoria. There was very low multicultural interactions there. And when I was in Gaza, I was working with pretty much the whole world and how everybody works. And now I've jumped into a new role in Australia, and I'm in much of the same kind of space where it is very multicultural. So MSF has prepared me for working around the world. Um, Probably, yeah, not on a finance and HR front, but yeah, that's something that I really learned and has helped me in my career now.
yeah, sure. And what about some of the more technical side, you know, budget control, reporting,
Yeah,
you know,
I
local
think
industrial requirements?
yeah. So it's about being able to run a business, and bringing it back down to the basics. And so, do we have enough money? What is the projections? What are the forecasts? How many people do we need? What are the projections? How much do we need to recruit for? And it's really fundamentals of business that MSF is running. It's not complex balance sheets or finding depreciation or anything like that. But if there are problems in terms of laws that you don't understand, because different HR laws around the world, you have the local experience, but then you also have Paris, you also have Jerusalem at that time, that already know and can advise you. And so if you don't know anything or you don't understand something, you just call, email,
So just
and
being able to ask and
yeah, yeah,
communicate well and identify who can help you
yeah.
with what is key.
And something that really helped me was the handover notes and being able to refer back to those. And then when you go to a mission, to speaking to everyone that's watching today, continue to add on to those and make them so that they're refined. So the next person that comes in is well established and prepared.
Yeah. How would you say how would you describe the biggest difference in working in the field with MSF in this role compared to, say, in human resources compared to at home in Australia?
Um, a bit tongue in cheek, I would say I drank a lot more coffee, because there is probably higher expectations of you to be able to respond to an emergency. And maybe it's not so much put on you, but you put it on yourself in my regard. But then I suppose it's the multicultural aspect of it and how people interact and communicate that I found fundamentally different. From a finance perspective, it's bread and butter, the same kind of things. But then there's all these little niches around how the MSF system works, from paying your bills in the right way to how you do your recruitment and documenting that. And that's like any organization that you walk into. But the difference from working in Australia to working within MSF would be the security context and being self-aware and being prepared for that. I lived in quite good living conditions, but then there was a high security issue. And you have to be prepared for that mentally. And you have good support around you and you have good teams that you can talk to. But then from a systems point of view, it's the same stuff, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes, so could you worked in Gaza initially in your first assignment, then afterwards you went last year to Ukraine. Could you talk to us about the numbers of people that you had to manage in the second project in the Ukraine? Was it a few more that you had to be responsible for?
It was much the same. I probably wanted to just emphasize the point flexibility is really, really important. MSF has a high need for HR and finance people. When I got there again in Ukraine, we had gaps. And when you're starting up a new assignment or a new project, obviously you're going to have gaps. It's like starting up a new business. You don't have everyone there. So at that time, there was people that were coming and going, and it was really difficult. And you had to be really flexible around just working together as a team and problem solving and continuing to try and serve the local community as best as you can. In terms of numbers of people, I suppose I was at coordination at that time. I had 3 different projects that I had finance managers within that I was directly supporting. And then you had HR managers as well in there. And every day there was a coming and a going and something else that needed to be different. And you were constantly recruiting and finding how to manage the cash flow into a new finance and banking system that MSF had never really worked with in Paris. MSF France had never worked in before. So there were chalk and cheese, one established mission with good staff that have been there for years, and then recruiting and setting up a new business structure.
Yeah, sure. It does sound like quite a difference. And that just brings me to thinking about, building a career with MSF, Jake. I know you've got reasons why at the moment you're working in Victoria, but what are the kind of training opportunities that MSF offers to try and build a career? Because certainly MSF is really interested in people who would like to have a career with us.
Yeah. Well, there's a career path, really, really clear career path. You start at the project, you understand your bread and butter, you know how projects work. Then you can go up to coordination when you have more experience and you're looking at working in the capitals or in a more established location, and you're coordinating and overarching and monitoring the projects themselves with a bit more experience and a bit more responsibility. And then you can work into a headquarters and it's extending again. While I was in Gaza, I did 4-hop training. I'm not really sure what the acronym.
What training? Sorry, didn't quite
It's called 4-hop training, something for hospitals, but it was really good. We broke down it was like almost a small masters of how to run a hospital effectively. And we broke down how the project itself was working and then did a strategic plan on how to make it more efficient. And so MSF gave me a certificate, and it's something that we do around the projects. And that was a great lesson. I came back to Australia in between my missions, like by assignments, and I had offered from Sydney to say, hey, you can go do an assignment, not an assignment, a course with Red R and do a heat course. And so that was to upskill you in being able to work.
A heat course, did you say?
Yeah, heat capitals, that is. It's about working in high pressure, really stressful situations that are not particularly safe and being able to look after yourself. And then just recently, MSF has put me through some career coaching as well to when I come back to be able to improve my management skills, how I interview others, and look at career paths. So the amount of time that I've put in, I feel like MSF has definitely invested back in me.
Yeah, well, that's good to know. And Just going back to the two assignments that you did, thinking about the importance of team morale, Jake,
Yeah.
in the roles that you took in as a finance and HR manager, what are the kinds of activities that you could organise that would make the difference in keeping morale up, given there was such challenges in the workplace?
Yeah, I would say that a HR manager is almost should be a line in there saying chief of morale. And I know that when I was the HR manager at that time in Gaza handed over to me, she gave me a list of external contacts and say other NGOs and say now you need to be able to interact with all of them and organize dinners and activities with them. I focused on we had a couple of parties, and so there was no drinking, but there was some movie nights. I set up a gym in the bunker downstairs, and I was also always out doing something with a different NGO and bringing them all together, and that really helps when you have to problem solve. And I'm sure that our MSF had to interact with the UN or with the Red Cross, and you already know those people from a volleyball game. And so then you can call up and say, hey, do you know if the government at the time has changed this and what do you know about it? And so morale, but then also local intelligence was really good.
It'll just make all the difference, having
Yeah.
that, put the effort into building those relationships. Yeah, and another question I want to ask, Jake, was just, the kind of experience and skills that you've developed working with MSF. How have they had a bit of an influence on the type of roles you've taken on back here in Australia?
Yeah, I think that if I no, if I didn't go to MSF, I would have been probably 5 years behind in my career path that I am at now. You see the
That's a lot,
stress.
5 years.
Absolutely, I have no doubt. I have no doubt. I've really jumped a couple of runs in my current role because of the experience that I
So
have had
just,
with
do you
MSF.
mean being thrown in the deep end, just
Yep.
having to get across quite a number of things quickly?
Yeah, and I don't think it's the name MSF or the role that I had. It's actually that I have confidence in my capacity to work in stressful environments. I have confidence in being able to problem solve and to work things out and to work with individuals and multicultural systems. And so there is an aspect of it where you've got this experience and an organization wants to pick you up, but then you have to be able to front up to that and deliver. And so MSF has really helped me with that, I would honestly have to say.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And look, we're just going to, we could talk for ages, I know, but um, I would like to move across to our audience and take some questions, Jake, if you don't mind. Um, I would say while we're waiting for that question that we will send you more information after tonight. But I've got a question in the first instance from Tanya, who asks, with your work with MSF, what are you most proud of?
I think it's probably the impact that you have on local people. That's definitely a question without notice. So I'm speaking quite frankly, but being able to have create a positive environment for the people in a really stressful situation that can't escape or that are in poor environments, and being able to give them some hope and some guidance and to support them in the work that they're doing, because it's their communities that are having the greatest impact. And if you can support them in being able to deliver better service, yeah, I think that's would be what I would be most proud of on both contexts and the
Yeah,
relationships you have.
sure. And are you in touch still with some of your colleagues from the two assignments?
Yeah, absolutely. Probably my two closest, like my right hand people, would be the ones that I interacted with the most. But I do get the odd message here and there as well. Um, so yeah, I am still in contact.
Yeah, that's great. I have a question from Josh who asks, what has been the most challenging situation you've faced?
Um, Challenging situation. I suppose it's probably on a HR front, to be honest. Like you might be, Josh might be leaning towards the security front or the food issue that you might have had, or no electricity for a day. But yeah, I think it would be on making calls on HR decisions that are going to have effect on someone that may potentially be in a really vulnerable situation. I won't extend on that, but from a HR perspective, that it's a moral code that you need to work towards as well. So I think that would be one of my most challenging spaces that I've worked in. Because when you walk away after your assignment, that's still those decisions are still having an impact.
Yeah, yeah, no, that sounds so important. And I've got a few questions here, so I'll keep it moving along. I've got a question from Linda who's asking you if you could look. I know it's not possible to talk about a typical day, but if you could describe one day in Gaza, first thing, starting with that coffee,
Yeah.
what does that one day in the
So
field look like?
very, very much the same for both the missions. For me, it was always a gym session or some kind of exercise early in the morning. Then it's load up on food, and then you're prepared for the rest of the day, no matter what happens. Then I would walk to work with locals and grab a coffee and chat along the way, and you'll get the security context, the news, a bit of intel, which is really important just for your well-being, I think, but then also to prepare and be aware of what's happening. For me, anyway, there's a couple of really good apps that I would wake up to and always check for media releases and if there was any missile in both projects and if there was any threat over the night, because that's when usually they would occur. And then from there, it's about a couple of meetings. MSF's really good for meetings and organizing and maintaining communication, your emails, and then setting your team priorities. Well, I would have done that the night before to say, right, what are we doing and what are our focuses? But it's just about a little touch base to make sure that things are there. As a HR and finance manager, door is always open and you'll have people rolling through all day problem solving. You have to problem solve and have the next crisis. And maybe it's not a crisis, but for that individual, it would be.
And are some days not that different to what they might be in Australia, where you're in the office, you're at your computer, and it's very much an office-based job, whereas other days you're out doing things that are really quite different to what you'd ever come across here?
My current job that I have in Australia is very much the same, where I will have days in and out of the office and going to see the locations and where the work actually is. But from a day to day, if you wanted to, if you were an introvert, you could stay behind your desk and do just the finances. It's not the best way of running a project, but you could definitely be in a routine and making sure that just you're at the laptop and running it from there. I would definitely promote not doing that and organizing at least weekly to go out to surgery and go out to physios and go out to see what nutrients are required depending on the mission and doing some recce's and learning about what's actually needed at the projects, at the ground roots, I would say.
People often talk about how one day is never the same as the next, that you just
Oh,
never know what the day is going to bring.
yeah. Yeah, and then there can be like with MSF, with finance and HR roles, you're there for 9 months. It's important that you're there for a long time and understand the history and setting the next budget up or setting the next HR strategy up and what the workload's going to be. So there are days and weeks that are the same as well, though. A meeting, make sure that the financials are done, make sure the forecasts are in, make sure that the recruitment drive is done correctly. And so there are mundane days as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I would just emphasise that we're really looking for people who are available for a minimum of 9 months. And it's good to have that length of time, particularly on your first assignment, because then you really start to get a sense of what the project is about. It takes time. And
Yeah,
then to get something done and then to get ready to hand over to the next person.
I would agree. And going to Josh's point, it's what's the hardest thing? It's those first couple of months. You get through those and understand the actual assignment. and the people. And then the hardest thing for me was to make sure that I knew how to use the systems correctly and had confidence in how to operate within them. Once you get past those first 2 months, then you're able to actually deliver on what you're there for.
Yeah, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I have a question from Pedro who says he'd like to work for MSF in the future, but he's just wondering what are the key skills he should concentrate on getting experience with?
That's a hard one. I don't know what Pedro's skills are,
That's a
but
big
I would
question.
say if you know how to run your own personal budget, that's the first thing, and being able to make cash flow, secure your money, and then forecast your budget, and then plan for that. Then what people do you need around you? So HR front do a needs assessment, and work with the nurses and the doctors and the physios to understand what's required. And so then you just need to understand HR structures, and how the organization works. Um, you put those two together and you're a pretty resourceful individual, then you can solve most things.
Yeah, yeah, it's good to know. I have a question from Mary for you, Jake. How do you plan your assignments? What do you pack?
Oh yeah, depends on the location. I would say 2 to 3 bags. And so you have a backpack, a big one, to carry all your stuff in, and then you have a go bag, and then you have like a day bag. So that was something. Some good footwear, probably 3 pair of runners. What other like little life hacks did I have? I have a
Some
watch.
chocolate, and depending
Uh,
if you're going, good coffee or
yeah, yeah, yeah.
wine even.
Yeah, so that you're talking about the bribes that you need to do for your local, not for your locals, for your current staff. So
Yeah,
yeah, you're expected to bring some cheese, or some good bread or some good food along the way. If you're an Australian, it's easy, Tim Tams and Vegemite, and then yeah, some little souvenirs that you can put in your backpack. Um, I say battery pack chargers are really important just to have that as a backup.
yeah,
If
yeah. Look,
there's no electricity, yeah, it's a struggle with communication.
thanks, Jake. Really, really appreciate that. And look, we could talk for quite a while about all the different things that we could take to the field. We really appreciate everyone's questions tonight, and we look forward to hearing from you. After tonight, we'll send you an email with links to the criteria and how to apply. Any questions that we haven't answered, we'll follow up with in the next 24 hours. We really hope it's been useful. We look forward to seeing your applications. I'd really like to just say a very big thank you to Jake. It's been terrific having you with us. Great chance to have a good conversation about this. Thanks and good night.